Germany, May 1943. A Feldpost envelope arrived, creased, bearing a red censor's stamp. Inside, a German family found words from their son, captured in Tunisia, now a prisoner in America. He wrote of meat every day, white bread, coffee, even pay 80 cents daily earned for work. Back home, the family shared meager rations. Food was scarce, coffee a distant memory. Neighbors whispered, how could this be? Berlin had told them Americans shot prisoners, mistreated all captives. The official answer was ready: enemy lies. These were forgeries written under duress, but Berlin's propaganda machine was about to fight a losing war against its own soldiers' handwriting. May 1943, Tunisia. Axis forces in North Africa crumpled. Over 250,000 soldiers became prisoners, tens of thousands of them German. They were then shuttled across the Atlantic, bound for a vast American camp system. By war's end, roughly 380,000 to 425,000 German POWs would be held there. These men had been fed a relentless diet of propaganda about what capture would mean. But America operated under the 1929 Geneva Convention. For its own strategic reasons, the United States upheld these rules. The convention guaranteed prisoners basic rights, housing comparable to garrison troops, regular rations, pay for work, and crucial to this story, mail. Each month, typically a set allowance of letters and postcards, routed through the International Committee of the Red Cross. Every piece of correspondence faced scrutiny. Censors worked on the American camp side, then again by German authorities. The journey across the ocean, through multiple checkpoints, took weeks, sometimes months. Some letters never arrived. Despite these delays, despite the censorship on both sides, a torrent began to flow. A sheer volume nobody in Berlin had ever planned for. Inside those envelopes, an astonishing narrative unfolded. The men wrote of meals that consistently featured meat, a forgotten luxury. They described white bread, so different from home, some swore it tasted like cake. This abundance, a world away from the grinding scarcity on the rationed streets of Germany. Prisoners earned canteen coupons, not cash, 80 cents a day for labor on American farms. With these, they bought small comforts, toiletries, extra cigarettes, even an occasional beer where permitted. But life wasn't just work. They detailed camp activities, afternoons spent playing football, evenings watching films, even attending educational classes. An organized, almost ordinary existence behind barbed wire. These were not the conditions drilled into German soldiers. This was not the brutal enemy Berlin portrayed. Back home, the effect was immediate. Mothers clutched these thin sheets, reading lines aloud to disbelieving neighbors. The news spread by word of mouth, a shared murmur down entire streets. Letters passed hand to hand through families, each reading offering another crack in the official narrative. The propaganda ministry's response, according to postwar accounts, was swift and decisive. They declared the letters forgeries, or propaganda written under coercion, forced from the prisoners by their American captors. But a forged letter does not know the specific nickname of the family dog. It cannot invent a childhood memory or repeat a private joke from years past. Crucially, it could not reproduce the unique, familiar handwriting of a son, a husband, a brother. Each careful curve, each distinctive stroke. This personal signature was the one detail Berlin could not counterfeit its way around. This sheer volume of deeply personal, verifiable correspondence became an unstoppable force. It corroded the official narrative, one familiar, hand-drawn stroke at a time. Hundreds of thousands of men, spread across hundreds of camps, each with a monthly mail allowance. Month after month, a slow, unstoppable drip of first-person testimony directly into German homes. Censors on both ends trimmed what they could, but the damaging part passed the censors freely, because the damaging part was simply the truth. The forgery line was already faltering under the weight of familiar handwriting, and there was a second problem. Wehrmacht counter-propaganda had explicitly told soldiers that Americans shot their prisoners. That surrender meant certain death. The accumulating weight of thousands of letters proved otherwise. The regime's carefully constructed narrative began to fracture. The problem compounded. American psychological warfare units had dropped millions of safe conduct passes known as Passerschein over German lines for months. These small leaflets explicitly promised fair treatment, full adherence to the Geneva Convention. A soldier had only to show it upon surrender. Now, the prisoner's own truthful letters, arriving faithfully, sitting in countless German kitchen drawers, unequivocally corroborated those very promises. This created a powerful, undeniable feedback loop. According to internal accounts from the propaganda ministry, especially within Joseph Goebbels' inner circle, the phenomenon of the well-treated POW became a profound strategic disaster. Every honest, detailed letter from America, every description of regular meals, made surrendering to the Americans a less terrifying prospect. The sheer truth eroded the deep fear Goebbels had painstakingly built into the Wehrmacht. Historians still debate how large the effect on surrender rates really was. Which direction it pushed, nobody debates. Life behind barbed wire, however decent, was not idyllic. Homesickness, a constant dull ache, settled deep in many men. They were confined by fences, by the distant hum of American life beyond the gates. Their pay, the 80 cents a day earned working the fields, arrived not as cash, but in canteen scrip. No crisp American dollars for a prisoner, and the censors still watched. On both ends, German and American authorities examined every line. Passages could be cut, blacked out, rendering sentences incomplete. But a deeper, more immediate censorship often loomed inside the camps themselves. Hardline Nazi factions operated among the hundreds of thousands of prisoners. They enforced a rigid ideological discipline, praising America too loudly, detailing the regular food or comfortable conditions with too much enthusiasm. It could mark a man. Camp enforcers watched closely, names were noted, threats materialized in hushed conversations. The pressure to conform, to denounce the enemy, was immense. For some, the war had not ended. It had simply moved to the barracks. The US eventually recognized the problem. To maintain order and protect those who sought merely to survive, authorities segregated these unyielding, hardcore Nazis. They sent them to separate facilities, camps like Alva, Oklahoma, becoming holding pens for the most fervent. So the letters were true. Their message of decent treatment, regular meals, undeniable, but writing them honestly. That often took courage twice. Once against the distant German censor waiting to cut a line, and once against the man in the next bunk listening for a word. By 1946, American camps emptied. Most German POWs departed. Some first served months, even years, in post-war labor across France and Britain. Then finally home, the sons who stepped off the trains, then walked through their own doorways, visibly healthy, sturdy, faces full, shoulders squared. This living truth became the final refutation. The years of German propaganda claiming mistreatment, shattered by simple sight. Families had shared the letters, sparking questions. Now the proof stood before them. Some of these men, surprisingly, found themselves homesick, not for Bavaria, but for the Kansas farms where they had worked. Years later, a few even returned to America, not as prisoners, but as free men, immigrants seeking new lives. One artifact, however, offers perhaps the quietest, most enduring testimony. At Camp Algona, Iowa, in 1945, prisoner Eduard Kaib led a team of comrades. They gathered scraps, bits of wood, paint, cloth, and from these humble materials they carved a nativity scene, more than 60 figures, intricate, half-life size, Joseph, Mary, the wise men, each figure a piece of resilience behind barbed wire. Today, Algona still displays this scene, every Christmas, tended carefully by the town, a fragile thing made by enemy hands that outlasted the propaganda of both sides and outlived the war itself. These stories, documented through their own words, deserve to endure. Subscribe so they aren't lost to time. Tell us in the comments, where are you watching from?